All right, y'all. Let's talk about it. I would say it's official. The second Gilded Age is here. It won't be that long, y'all, until we have our first trillionaire. Trillionaire. I mean, look, you're talking to a guy. I don't even think we should have billionaires. Never mind trillionaires. If we don't do something about this extreme income and wealth inequality, I don't know how the pitchforks don't come out. You know, I don't know how that happens. Maybe we have enough distractions with, whatever, Netflix and video games and TV and that social media that, like, we never get to that point. But god damn, are we getting wildly, wildly fucked over. So let me walk you through this. Wealth of the world's billionaires has more than doubled over the past decade. Driven largely by the accumulation of massive wealth by the richest people in the United States, the Swiss wealth manager UBS said Thursday that the assets of billionaires around the world more than doubled over the past decade. Between 2015 and 2024, the total wealth of billionaires increased by 121% from 6.3 trillion to 14 trillion. Meanwhile, MSCI AC World Index of Global Equities, which measures the performance of more than 3,000 stocks from both developed and emerging markets, rose by 73%. The planet's total gross domestic product is about 105.4 trillion, with a population of just over 8 billion, underscoring the extreme concentration of wealth among the very richest people. The number of billionaires rose from 1,757 to 2,682 over the past decade, while the wealthiest people in the world boasted significant gains over just the past year. Billionaires' wealth jumped by about 17% in 2024, with the accumulation of wealth among the richest people in the U.S. offsetting a decline in China. U.S. billionaires amassed wealth gains that were 27.6% higher than the previous year, accumulating a total of $5.8 trillion, more than 40% of international billionaire wealth. The tax cuts pushed through by President-elect Trump and the Republican Party in 2017 are still in effect in the U.S. tax policy. Analysts have found that the law was skewed to the rich. No shit. With households in the top 1% of incomes expecting to receive an average tax cut of more than $60,000 in 2025, compared to an average tax cut of less than $500 for people in the bottom 60%. By the way, the tax cuts for the wealthy were permanent. The tax cuts for the working class were not. There was a sunset provision in there for regular people and your tax cuts. As Common Dreams reported this week, the top 12 U.S. billionaires now control $2 trillion. 12 billionaires control $2 trillion. The wealth of the four richest people in the U.S., Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Larry Ellison, and Mark Zuckerberg, has hit $1 trillion. These four men were worth $74 billion 12 short years ago. Stop and think about that. These guys, these four billionaires, were worth $74 billion 12 years ago. Now they're worth $1 trillion. At the G20 summit last month, world leaders agreed to engage cooperatively to ensure that ultra-high net worth individuals are effectively taxed. Oh, please. Who believes that? Who believes that, y'all? More. Unsettling new milestone. Top 12 U.S. billionaires now control $2 trillion in wealth. The oligarchic dozen is richer than ever, and they are endowed with extreme material power that can be used to pursue narrow political interests at the expense of democratic majorities, according to the author of the new analysis. The point here is simple. Extreme wealth is the destruction of democracy. You cannot have democracy while having oligarchy. Because what happens is these oligarchs have the wealth and have the power to buy the government and rig it in their favor and screw regular people. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening. This is a threat to our democratic institutions. Having this much extreme wealth is a threat because effectively you get to the point where one of these oligarchs they control the government. And in a sense, they have more power than the government does because they own the politicians. So we're at the whim of the oligarchs, of the robber barons. Just 12 U.S. billionaires now have a collective net worth of over $2 trillion, a figure that amounts to a little less than a third of total federal spending in 2023, according to an analysis out Tuesday from inequality.org, a project of the Institute for Policy Studies. The $2 trillion number is also twice the amount of wealth that the top 12 U.S. billionaires held in 2020. Jesus. So according to this, it doubled since 2020. Wow. The full list of 12 billionaires includes Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, blah, blah, blah. Let's get to the rise of the centibillionaire. Here's Robert Reich. And here's what he has to say.
If you're a regular billionaire, you can afford a private jet. If you're a centibillionaire, you can afford a brand new Gulfstream jet every single day for more than 10 years. Not sure what you do with a new Gulfstream jet every day, but maybe give one to each of your closest 4,000 friends. A regular billionaire would struggle to buy their own professional baseball team. It's sad, I know, but a centibillionaire could easily buy every team in the entire major league. If you're a regular billionaire, you can donate to your alma mater and get your name on a building. If you're a centibillionaire, you could single-handedly give every teacher in America an $8,000 raise for 5 straight years.
Stop and think about that. If you have over $100 billion, you can give an $8,000 raise to every teacher in America for 5 straight years. How can anybody not support taxing the wealthy and redistributing, giving people health care, giving people a universal basic income check, giving a raise to teachers? To not support raising taxes on the rich is the most cucked shit I've ever seen in my life. It is mental. These are the people who are really destroying people's lives. The Republicans want to point at trans people and immigrants and say they're the reason why your life is all messed up. Not remotely. It's the billionaires. It's the corporations. They're the ones who've made people's lives a living hell. They're the reason so many people have to work 2 jobs. Again, medical bankruptcies are the number one cause of bankruptcy in this country. Medical bills are the number one cause of bankruptcy. You could wipe all that out. By the way, some Democratic states have already done that. They buy up medical debt for pennies on the dollar and wipe it out. You could easily wipe out all the medical debt. You could easily... 600,000 homeless people, including, 50,000 homeless veterans, thereabouts, probably more than that. And centibillionaires exist. What the fuck are we talking about?
Of course, that's not all you could do. $100 billion is enough to wipe out all the medical debt in the United States or provide permanent shelter for every...
And by the way, that $100 billion number, that's before you negotiate it down. They're willing to negotiate down to pennies on the dollar. You could probably wipe it all out for fucking 10 billion or 5 billion.
In the United States. Or provide permanent shelter for every homeless person in America.
Permanent shelter for every homeless person in America with the money from one centibillionaire.
Or buy COVID-19 vaccines for the entire world. Basically what I'm saying is $100 billion is a lot of money. More than 2.5 million times what the average American worker makes. In a year. So here's the big question. Are these centibillionaires so rich because they work 2.5 million times harder than the average American?
Yes, that's the main fucking point. I've been screaming this for a decade now. In the American mind, some people think, look, this is what you're taught when you're a kid, right? The harder you work, the further you go. The harder you work, the further you go. And it's just not true. Some of the hardest working people I know live at or below the poverty line. So it's not the case that the harder you work, the further you go. And I think everybody kind of on some level wants that to be the case. They want to reward people who have discipline and hard work and try to get ahead and try to play by the rules, etc. But that's just not how it is. In fact, some of the people who make it to the top in this system either were born into extreme wealth and privilege, or genuinely they get lucky, or they're the most shameless and cutthroat, which usually helps you rise up the ranks in capitalism, right? So we don't live in a meritocracy. If anything, we are closer to an anti-meritocracy. These people did not work, 2.5 million times harder, whatever the fuck?
2.5 million times harder than the average American? Are they really 100 times smarter than the typical billionaire? Personally, I don't think so. The reason for the rise of centibillionaires is that for decades, wealth hasn't trickled down. It's gushed up all the way to the very top. And that's not an accident. As it turns out, the system that the super rich themselves carefully crafted and lobbied for benefits the super rich. And while you may not own more private jets than your average centibillionaire, you probably do pay a higher tax rate. And thanks to legal loopholes and the Trump tax cuts, when the wealthiest Americans die, they get to pass on most of their centibillions to their kids, tax-free. We've got 2 choices as a country. We can tax the richest Americans fairly and invest that money in ways that benefit all of us. Or we can keep doing what we're doing and watch as centibillionaires get even richer while the rest of us get left behind. If you think wealth and power are too concentrated in the hands of a privileged few now, just imagine what a few more years of trickle-down nonsense will bring. Of course, it won't be all bad. At least trillionaire is easy to say.
It's coming. It's coming. Unless we fucking do something about it. It's coming, man. This system has not justified its existence. It just hasn't. It's so out of whack. It's so insane. It's so extreme. It's at the point where it looks just as preposterous as fucking feudalism did. Right? Okay, more. Here, we're in the second Gilded Age, y'all.
Ultra-wealthy elites, political corruption, vast inequality. These problems are not new. In the late 1800s, they dominated the country during America's first Gilded Age. We overcame these abuses back then. And we can do it again. Mark Twain coined the moniker the Gilded Age in his 1873 novel to describe the era in American history characterized by corruption and inequality that was masked by a thin layer of prosperity for a select few. The end of the 19th century and start of the 20th century marked a time of great invention. Bustling railroads, telephones, motion pictures, electricity, automobiles, which changed American life forever. But it was also an era of giant monopolies: oil, railroad, steel, finance, run by a small group of men who had grown rich beyond anything America had ever seen. They were known as robber barons because they ran competitors out of business, exploited workers, charged customers exorbitant prices, and lived like royalty as a result. Money consumed politics. Robber barons and their lackeys donated bundles of cash to any lawmaker willing to do bidding on their behalf. And when lobbying wasn't enough, the powerful turned to bribery, resulting in some of the most infamous political scandals in American history. The gap between the rich and poor in America reached astronomical levels. Large numbers of Americans lived in squalor. Anti-immigrant sentiment raged, leading to the enactment of racist laws to restrict immigration, and voter suppression, largely aimed at black men who had recently won the right to vote, was rampant. The era was also marked by dangerous working conditions. Children, often as young as 10 years old, but sometimes younger, worked brutal hours in sweatshops. Workers trying to organize labor unions were attacked, sometimes killed. It seemed as if American capitalism was out of control, and American democracy couldn't do anything about it because it was bought and paid for by the rich. But Americans were fed up, and they demanded reform. Many took to the streets in protest. Investigative journalists, often called muckrakers then, helped amplify their cries by exposing what was occurring throughout the country, and a new generation of political leaders rose to end the abuses. Politicians like Teddy Roosevelt, who warned that a small class of enormously wealthy and economically powerful men, whose chief object is to hold and increase their power, could destroy American democracy. After becoming president in 1901, Roosevelt used the Sherman Antitrust Act to break up dozens of powerful corporations. Seeking to limit the vast fortunes that were creating a new American aristocracy, Congress enacted a progressive income tax through the 16th Amendment, as well as 2 wealth taxes. The first wealth tax in 1916 was the estate tax, a tax on the wealth of someone accumulated during their lifetime, paid by the heirs who inherited it. The second tax on wealth, enacted in 1922, was a capital gains tax, a tax on the increased value of assets paid when those assets were sold. The reformers of the Gilded Age also stopped corporations from directly giving money to politicians or political candidates. And then Teddy Roosevelt's fifth cousin, you may have heard of him, continued the work through his New Deal programs.
They used to have laws about money in politics. And it was like, sorry, can't do that. It's bribery. Then the Supreme Court, starting in the 1970s and in subsequent decisions, decided, no, money is speech. And you could have unlimited money. Super PACs, for example, come to mind. And the result is exactly what we're seeing. The result is the second Gilded Age. That's the result. Now just wait until what remains of our meager social safety net, wait until they take a hatchet to that, right? And wait until that first trillionaire happens, which will not be that far in the future. Just wait. Just wait. Because the anger of the American public, as soon as they figure out who the real enemy is, right? As soon as they get that it's multinational corporations and billionaires, oh man, it's going to be a tumultuous time to try to fight to get the change we need.
Creating Social Security, unemployment insurance, a 40-hour work week, and requiring that employers bargain in good faith with labor unions. But following the death of FDR and the end of World War II, when America was building the largest middle class the world had ever seen, We seem to forget about the abuses of the Gilded Age. Now, more than a century later, America has entered a second Gilded Age. It's also a time of extraordinary invention, and a time when monopolies are taking over vast swaths of the economy. So we must renew antitrust enforcement to bust up powerful companies. Now, another generation of robber barons is accumulating unprecedented money and power. So once again, we must tax these exorbitant fortunes. Wealthy individuals and big corporations are once again paying off lawmakers, sending them billions to conduct their political campaigns, even giving luxurious gifts to Supreme Court justices. So we need to protect our democracy from big money, just as we did before. Voter suppression runs rampant in the states, as during the first Gilded Age, making it harder for people of color to participate in what's left of our democracy. So it's once again critical to defend and expand voting rights. Working people are once again being exploited and abused. Child labor is returning. Unions are busted. The poor are again living in unhealthy conditions. Homelessness is on the rise. And the gap between the ultra-rich and everyone else is nearly as large as in the first Gilded Age. So, once again, we need to protect the rights of workers to organize, invest in social safety nets, and revive guardrails to protect against the abuses of great wealth and power. The question now is the same as it was at the start of the 20th century. Will we fight for an economy and a democracy that works for all rather than the few? We've done it before. We can and must do it again.
Just to put it in perspective for you guys, the bottom 80% of the country holds 7% of the wealth. The bottom 80% holds 7% of the wealth. There's that RAND study that we always cite. The top 1% in this country effectively stole $50 trillion from the bottom 90% since 1974. So what that means is every working American would have an extra $1,144 per month every month for the rest of your life if we just had the same income disparity as we had in 1974. Think about that. The top 1% holds 30% of the wealth. That's $43 trillion. The bottom 50% holds just 2.6% of the wealth. So what I'm trying to get across to you is that however bad you think the income and wealth inequality is, it's worse. It's worse. It's preposterously out of whack, and this is the source of so many problems. 3 of the richest billionaires combined have more than the bottom 50% of America. And again, if you think, well, look, they work hard, they made it to the top, they're the smartest, they're the best among us, wrong. In fact, we know the numbers. 60% of billionaires came from extreme wealth and privilege. 60%. Did you know that in the wake of the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession, during the recovery, 95% of the economic gains went to the top 1%? I mean, it's preposterous. It's preposterous. And as they pointed out, the richest 400 Americans have an effective tax rate of 23%, and the bottom 50% have an effective tax rate of 24.2%. So in other words, the bottom 50% pay a higher effective tax rate than the richest Americans. It's beyond parity. So how do we get to this point? Very simple. War on unions. There was a war on unions. Private sector unions used to be about 33% of the workforce. It's down to 6%. And then, of course, corporations and billionaires bought the government. So they rigged it. They give themselves tax cuts. They give themselves corporate welfare. When stuff goes belly up, they give themselves bailouts, right? Privatize the profits, socialize the losses. And that's how you end up where we are. And so, look, we know what the solutions are. We know you got to get money out of politics and get clean elections. That's a given. We know you need strong unions. Every worker should have the right to join a union. We know you need a higher minimum wage. We know you need universal health care. We know you need Social Security for all. This is the kind of stuff that you need. This is the kind of stuff that you need. And unfortunately, we're going in the opposite direction now. Now you have the richest man in the world, oligarch Elon Musk, buddy with Donald Trump, who's also a billionaire and bought by countless special interests and corporations and other billionaires. And they're going to move us in the other direction. And so the second Gilded Age is here. And for the near future, it's only going to get worse until we fight back effectively. All right, guys, that's the show, y'all. Love y'all very much. Sorry to end on such a downer note, but it is what it is. Everybody do me a big favor. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. That helps out massively. Click that bell icon so you get a notification every time a video drops. You can support the show on Patreon below, and much thank you to everybody who does that, or you could tip with the thanks button on YouTube, or you could sign up for Crystal Kyle and Friends, which is below on Substack as well. All right, guys, I'll see y'all back here tomorrow. Peace out. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.